India have won some famous test matches in recent past and throughout their history, but I do not think there is a test match win that carries as much significance as the Oval Test match of 1971. The 24th August is the 50th year of that win. That was the last day of that test match. 24th August 1971 was when the test match ended. India also won that series. So before going into that, some context. India had been a rather poor touring side. They until that point, throughout the 1960s and 50s, and until that point, India could beat only New Zealand away from home, and they did that largely because New Zealand at that point were the only test playing side weaker than India. Outside New Zealand, before the 1971 season, India had lost 17 test matches outside India. 5 in England in 1959, 5 in West Indies in 1962, 3 in England in 1967, and 4 in Australia a few months after that. So this was the scenario. After that, they beat New Zealand, of course, but as I mentioned, New Zealand were a weak side. So around the end of the 1960s, the selectors started making some changes. They got in some new cricketers. You'll see a lot of debutants in the 1969, 1970, 1971 period. They tried to bring in new cricketers. They let some old cricketers retire, and they brought in a new captain. They replaced Pataudi with Ajit Wadekar. So in 1971, India won their first test match against West Indies anywhere. They had not beaten them at home either. They won that series. And now they came to England, but even then, England were outright favourites. Not many gave India a chance. But the Indians worked on their fielding, and they decided to back their spinners. They had all-rounders who could bowl seam, Abid Ali and Solkar, but both Abid Ali and Solkar were excellent fielders and decent batters. And they had 4 spinners, Chandra, Bedi, Prasanna and Venkat. Of them, they could play 3. Venkat did way better than Prasanna in the tour matches, so they went in with Chandra, Bedi and Venkat. Now, in the first test at Lords, India, the scorecard may show that India should have lost the Lords test match. They were chasing 183, but they were up against time. There was not enough time. India were 21 for 2. Then Wadekar decided to promote Farooq Engineer, who could hit out. India became 87 for 2, but they were still running out of time. They continued to play their shots, and then they kept losing wickets. And then when rain finally came, India were 145 for 8. So it may seem that India might have lost, but had India played defensively, had they tried to save the match, they would probably have finished on something like 70 for 2. It would have looked an okay test match. But India actually wanted to win despite the past result. So that was the first time probably that they sent out a message that India want to win this one. In Old Trafford, of course, it was a lucky save for India. They needed to bat out all of day 5, had only 7 wickets in hand, but there was no play on day 5. And at the Oval, after 3 days of cricket, India were bowled out on the first morning. They conceded a first innings lead of 71. 2 balls before lunch on day 4, England were 24 for 1. They were leading by 95. They had 9 wickets in hand. Then someone from the Indian side asked Chandra to bowl the mill reef. The mill reef was Chandra's famous faster ball. The mill reef was the name of a racehorse. So this was the code name for the faster ball. So Chandra bowls the mill reef. Edrich, one of England's best batters, could not lower his bat in time. If you see the photographs, he had still not completed the shot when the ball hit the stumps. The next ball, the last ball before lunch, Chandra has Fletcher out. So from 24 for 1, England go to lunch at 24 for 3. And soon afterwards, they are bowled out for 101. Chandra takes 6 for 38. In 2000, Wisden did a poll for best Indian spell of the century, and this 6 for 38 was voted the best spell of the spell of the century. Mm, so India could bowl out. I mean, if you see the catch of Alan Knott taken by Eknath Solkar, if you Google with for images of that Test match, you'll see that catch. That was probably one of India's. That was probably Solkar's catch was the standalone photograph, the most popular photograph of that series. If you do a Google images search, you'll hit that very often. So the match was still not over. India still had to score 174, and at stumps they were 76 for 2. And first thing in the morning, first thing on the next morning, Wadekar is run out, and it becomes a struggle for India. They take 101 overs to score the 174 runs, and Wadekar sleeps through all of that. He gets run out first thing in the morning and he sleeps. He has to be woken up actually by the English manager Ken Barrington. And India took 101 overs, as I said. They would have taken longer had engineer not decided to play his shots. But the thing is, so India won the Test match and the series. But the thing is, why this win is significant? You see, this win was important for a generation. Some of a generation of cricketers and fans, some of whom remembered the British Raj, some of whom don't. Some of whom remembered the British Raj, some of them didn't. Some of them were born in probably the British era, but they had little memories. Some like Gavaskar and Vishwanath and Solkar were born after independence. So this was more than just a win. It sent a message. It was a message from the Indian team to that India can beat England at their sport, at their venue, and that was important because there were people back home who remembered the British Raj, who remembered what India went through in the 1940s, 1930s, 1920s. In 1971, these people were there. They said that the win meant a lot to them. That is probably not relatable as much to us now. To have lived under the British rule, then seen independence, then see a batch of young cricketers beat England in an English sport, on English soil. I mean, people celebrated back home. Those days there was no live telecast, there was radio, but there was a system. There was a concept of newsreels. So news clippings, you'll see these on YouTube a lot. They played 5 minutes of news clips before movies in theaters. So you could get to see 5 minutes of highlights of a day's play or a match roundup. You could often see that. And whenever that happened in 1971, after this win, the people stood up and clapped. It was something India had not experienced before. So you can see people. Some of us may remember the scenarios after the 2011 World Cup final. Strangers hugging each other, people celebrating on the streets until late at night. That happened in 1971 in some places in India. And remember, they did not get to see the match live. There was only radio, there was only newspapers, and even radio was not as common. India was still a new country. They were celebrating, they were boarding buses to congratulate each other. It was a remarkable scene. We have probably the 2 World Cups have given us those moments. We have seen such celebrations, but we could see them live, and these were not World Cup. This was simply beating a side in a test match, and at the same time, this was not beating any side. This was a side. This was a country that had ruled over India for almost 2 centuries. So some may say that had been some of that had been reconquered by when India won the gold medal in the 1948 Olympics at hockey. They beat England in the final at Wembley. But cricket, by 1970s, cricket became more mainstream than hockey. Had become more mainstream than hockey, and cricket was considered a more British sport than hockey. That always held, and that is still true. So beating England at cricket in England meant a lot. On day four, I mean, might also have been on day five. That is what photographic evidences show. Um, uh, or it might have been on both days. It might have been day for lunch, it might have been day for tea, or it might have been day five. Um, the local the local Indians got an elephant from the Chessington Zoo, Bella. So Bella walked on the oval because it was Ganesh Chaturthi. It was considered auspicious. The, on which day it is still debated. But if you ask me, I am more inclined to believe that the elephant was there on both days. I have read reports that mention both day 4. I have seen evidence that it was there on day 5. So probably it was there on both days. I'm not sure on which day it arrived. But yes, it meant a lot for the expatriate Indians as well in England, some of whom had probably let go of daily wages to watch in the Indian win on day 5. It meant a lot for them. It validated their stature in the country. It is an achievement that is very difficult for us to relate to today, because it was not merely a sporting win, it was also India asserting itself in front of the world.